All right, here's another example just to kind of talk through. There's not a whole lot for us to do, but just make sure that we understand what is happening. So we are given some information. We know that segment DH is congruent to segment HF. So in the picture, I'm going to go ahead and label those congruencies. So DH, I'm going to go ahead and put one little dash on it, is congruent to HF. Well, if you notice, you've got this segment DF, and if these two segments are congruent, then what does that tell us about point H? What can we conclude? That tells us that H is the midpoint. If you got two congruent segments like that, the point in the middle is the midpoint. So the one thing that we want to make sure we think about, we know that H is the midpoint of DF. Does that also mean that H is the midpoint of GE? So were we given any information to tell us that we had two congruent segments over here? I mean, I could look at the picture and say they kind of look the same. So are they congruent? Remember, those are things that we cannot assume in geometry. You have to be told that those are congruent. So just something to kind of make sure you have in your notes, just so you don't do this in other examples. We cannot assume that H is the midpoint of GE, because we don't know that GH and HE are congruent, so we cannot assume this one over here. But we can conclude that H is the midpoint, and let me be more specific, it's the midpoint of segment DF.